Good afternoon. My name's Shayan. I'm a partner on the investment team at Multichain. We're going to be talking about interoperability stuff. Excited to jam with all you people. Maybe we can just start with intros, tell us a little bit about what you're building, and yeah, take your time.
Yeah, my name is Dennis. I'm core contributor to ZetaChain, focusing primarily on developer experience. ZetaChain is an EVM-compatible platform for universal apps, meaning you build a contract, deploy it once on ZetaChain, and users from any connected chain like Ethereum, Polygon, Bitcoin, Solana, Ton can all interact with the same blockchain. So it's an interoperability. Yeah.
Hey, my name is Ajaz Merchant. I'm a dev relationship lead at Say Foundation. Say is an L1 general purpose, very fast. I'll tell you more about that, but excited to be here and thank you guys for having me.
Hey everyone, I'm Iago. I'm from Bitcoin OS. What we've built is the ability to take any VM, any code, compile it down to Bitcoin script, turn it into a ZK proof, and prove it to Bitcoin. So effectively turning Bitcoin into a universal compiler. For the first time, we're able to demonstrate that about 6 weeks ago at Bitcoin Nashville. So we thought it was a pretty big deal, second only to Trump being there. And now we're in the process of opening this up as a general purpose OS to allow everything and everyone to build on Bitcoin.
Hey everyone, my name's Sashan. I do strategy at the Wormhole Foundation, and Wormhole is a interop protocol, and we allow dApps to function over all the chains within DeFi, as well as just connecting all of DeFi as kind of the pipes to let messages, assets, and everything else go across all of the ecosystem.
Sweet. So maybe a good place to start is, why are people bridging things and what are they bridging? Do you want to take a first stab at that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have no idea why people are still bridging assets. In our opinion, that's kind of like something that should eventually go away, because often bridges depend on wrapped assets. They depend on multi-sig contracts, and it's just not that safe, as we've learned over the past years, right? So I think a more scalable, more actually secure solution is where you depend mostly on native assets, and you the way we see it, instead of point-to-point communication where you establish these ad hoc bridges and the value that you move gets wrapped and you have to unwrap them, thus kind of being dependent on the path that the asset takes. And that's actually true for more sophisticated protocols, like IBC, for example. In Cosmos, it still has this path dependence, which is not great, right? What you get is wrapped assets. The alternative is with thousands of chains that we have out there, at least the important ones, you instead route them in a way that automatically resolves an asset into a native one. So if you transfer, I don't know, USDC or USDT or any asset that exists on two chains in a native form, that's what you should get in the end.
So the question was, why are people bridging? Still bridging, is that what you asked?
Bridging, and what are they bridging in your experience?
People are probably
people bridging to Say, and are people bridging to Say at all?
Yeah, people are bridging, say, different situations. We're both CosmWasm and EVM compatible, so bridging is necessary for assets on both those execution layers. But I think people are bridging because they don't know any better. Maybe they're not sure what else is out there. Maybe they're just confused on how can I make this better? How can I go from one to another? And bridging might just be the easy solution, but there's different ways of going around it. Say being an execution layer for both, native Say and EVM. I think when you have situations where blockchains are talking to each other, you have the ability to just cross over without having to go to a third party to bridge, which I mean, the more programs you jump through, the more hard that UX is. And I think there's bridging because they don't know what else to do.
On one level, I'm kind of confused by the confusion you guys seem to have around why people are doing this. Every single blockchain is a registry of assets. People have value there. They want to move it from one place to another, which is what you always want to do with assets and value so that you can engage in economic activity. And so I think it's pretty obvious that people are going to be wanting to export and import value from these different chains. But on the other hand, on a deeper level, I completely agree with you, because we live in a world of network effects. All digital systems, and particularly blockchains, are networks. And there's a natural desire in any network environment to have everyone working on the same network. This is particularly valuable when the risks of moving assets from one chain to another, as these gentlemen have proposed, is so apparent. We've lost, over the last 2 years, billions and billions of dollars, mostly to North Korea, because of the exploits in trying to bridge from one network to another. And I think that's mostly due to the fact that the number one network that we have in the space, the one that we all look to, that is the center of gravity, it goes up, we all go up, it goes down, we all go down. The number one network effect belongs to Bitcoin. And up until now, it's been extremely limited in terms of what you can do. And so people have been building out all of these other environments. For the last 10 years, I've been working to build towards a world in which Bitcoin can do anything, can be can truly unleash its network effects. And so I do think that over time, we're going to see a migration of assets to Bitcoin, because it is the most secure, it is the registry of record for all assets. And ultimately, this will allow for trustless interoperability, not just of assets, but also of the data associated with these transactions in a trust minimized environment. And we can say goodbye to hacks and maybe see North Korea go bankrupt.
That was a great spiel. Really like that. I'll take more of a contrarian approach that, over the last year or so, we've seen countless L2s go live. We've got a bunch of alt L1s on the horizon. What is the fundamental narrative that is driving most of these? At the end of the day, it's airdrop farming. So I think as far as the last 12 months is concerned, that is the major driver of asset bridging, right? And it's going to all of these chains, but at the end of the day, most of the volume is going through the top 6 chains: Ethereum, Solana, Arbitrum, Optimism, Base. And what are the assets, to answer your second question? It's 90% is going through Ethereum, USDT, and USDC. And so if you're able to capture meaningful value add into using those assets on your chain, then everyone and their mum is going to actually want to send their assets to your chain because they're able to get great yield on it. I think the philosophical approach is obviously great, but fundamentally that is what users and people like us are doing at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, so these L1s are sort of islands in of themselves, and you can think of the assets that live there as a reflection of the GDP or the economic value that's happening there. Things are obviously moving, right? And trade is a good thing. But I'm curious to get a sense maybe from you, Ijaz, as an L1, right? Or as someone who's thinking about what sort of state you want on. It felt like you don't really want a ton of external, assets to come on chain versus in issuing assets natively. How do you think of that split, over the course of the next 12, 18 months? Is there sort of a defined set of, we would want natively issued assets to take up maybe, 70% of the chain's DLV versus, how do you think of that split? Bridged assets versus natively issued assets on, say?
To be fair, I don't think I think about it in that kind of way. It's an interesting question, because I think assets in any way they come can be, helpful in any situation. But between bridges and native assets, I mean, as long as there's transactions happening and people are building on the L1, I don't think it's so valuable to have a number split on which assets come in between which route. I think what's important is having just that usability of having things done pretty easily and not having any sort of lag or slow movement situation. So I'm not sure that helps your question, but that's kind of not a factor for me, at least.
Yeah, well, let's say you do bridge over a bunch of assets. Let's say you have Bitcoin and stables and all the basics that you want, right? What are the kinds of things you want people to do with them? Maybe, Don, if you want to take in, what are the sorts of applications, whether they're DeFi or external, that you can accomplish once you have kind of meaningful state, meaningful value living in a specific environment?
Well, I think the biggest opportunity right now in crypto by far, is unlocking the latent asset that is BTC. So if you take all of Ethereum and all of the dApps and DeFi and tokens built on it and all of Solana and everything on Say and everything on all of the other chains put together, they still represent a very small fraction of the value held in Bitcoin. But people right now are sitting on their Bitcoin like dragons, just waiting for nuclear war to come because there's nothing you can actually do with your BTC. So that is a huge blue ocean opportunity, right? Unlocking over $1 trillion and, 6 months from now, $5 trillion of value for people being able to earn yield, people being able to turn them into a backing for stablecoins, to borrow against them. It's a huge opportunity. We've already seen it play out on Ethereum. We've seen it play out in the rest of crypto. And now, sort of like China waking up, it's going to have massive growth because it just needs to do catch up. For me personally, I've been buying Bitcoin consistently since 2011. I've never sold a single coin because I don't think you need to. I think you just need to get to a point where you can live on your BTC, and that's the first big opportunity. But the bigger opportunity is for crypto itself to move over to the next chapter, to grow up. Right now, most of crypto is Ponzinomics, scams, schemes, gambling, and speculation. And that's not because of the people involved. It's not because that's the only thing we can do theoretically. It's because of the infrastructure we have available. The infrastructure we have available is software. All of the systems that have been built outside of Bitcoin are software. They are upgraded every 6 months. They change. They're not backwards compatible with previous changes. They're not reliable. They become spaghetti code over time. And anything real in finance, 95% of all of the value in the world is in long-term assets. For individuals, it's pensions, mortgages, savings accounts, right? Things which are going to last your entire lifetime, or maybe the lifetime of your children and grandchildren. For institutions, it's 10-year, 30-year bonds, large infrastructure projects that are only going to pay themselves out over 50 years, building data centers, taking long-term view on the market. These are all multi-decade time horizon things. And the only system, the only piece of permaware that we have is Bitcoin. And so I think as an industry, we've kind of limited ourselves to the speculative angle because we kind of missed what we were doing. We're not building mostly features and software. We're building systems to manage people's money and assets and financial lives. And so we need to be building conservative systems that do not change and are reliable for decades. And I think once we get that and marry that with the ability to have all of the functionality and bridging that we're talking about here, we get to move on to chapter 2, which is RWAs, TradFi, true finance, and basically bringing the entire world to blockchain.
Yeah, I completely agree about Bitcoin, and we're kind of approaching it from Zeta Chain's point of view in a different way. But what we I think agree on is empowering Bitcoin users to do more things with their Bitcoin, and we approach this from more like user experience point of view because the reason why I said bridging is not great is mostly also because of user experience. Nobody really wants to bridge anything. They want to do a much higher level sort of stuff. They want to buy a picture or they want to lend their Bitcoin to someone, right? Bridging is just this abstraction level that we're currently on, right? And eventually that has to be superseded with mechanisms that abstract away chains for users, and users wouldn't even know if there's NFTs on Solana. They just know they own it on a blockchain, right? And they bought it with Bitcoin, and they just clicked one button for it, and they didn't have to worry about gas. That's why I think like manually bridging is this kind of stopgap solution that will, as the industry, that we're gonna just evolve past eventually.
I think it's a really interesting tension between, Idan, what you mentioned around your constituents. Bitcoin is sort of like the hardest money, the hardest sort of forms of security around, the sanctity of what this asset is. And then Sushant's view of people are happy to put their assets in a 305 multisig when there's a point at the other end of it. So I guess how do you sort of square that revealed preference, stated preference gap between people wanting to care, or at least the optics of security? How do you square that?
I think it's really simple. If you look, we have. I walked into this place with a woman, and she said to me as we walked in, "This smells like a crypto conference, right? It's a bunch of dudes running from conference to conference."
I'm so excited to see how you wrap this.
in human environments, right? And like 20-something, 30-year-old dudes have high risk tolerance and short time horizons, and so they're trading. And the reason the industry looks like that to a great extent is because that's what the infrastructure allows us to do. But the reality is, all of us are engaged in this, but the majority of people, even multi-coin capital ultimately, right, are investing in all of these sort of far out end of the risk curve projects so that they can ultimately build bigger bags of Bitcoin. So even we, the smelly guys who come to crypto conferences, right, with low time horizons and high risk profiles, ultimately what we're trying to do is build generational wealth in Bitcoin. So the way I square this is what I would like to see is us moving into a new phase for crypto as a whole. And I think the only way we can accomplish that is by building, not for the 5% of finance, which is gambling and speculation, but for the 95% of finance, which is wealth growth and preservation. And actually, if you go to Bitcoin conferences, the crowd is older. There's Congress people there. There's people from major financial institutions headlining. And frankly, I think a lot of what they're talking about is bullshit, because the idea that you can build an economy just on one asset is insane. And so we need to really find a synthesis of these two ideas, the ability to have multiple different assets, young people with innovative approaches, building new things, which is currently what's missing in Bitcoin, but doing so on systems which are as reliable as nature itself, which is what we have in Bitcoin. And marrying those two things, that's the next phase. That's our future.
Dude, I love this guy.
Powerful
And Dennis,
stuff.
just to push back on like the chain abstraction narrative, it's like, so I was in Argentina like a month ago, right? And everyone has Binance, everyone has it. And if they want to get payments from anywhere, that is the biggest use case for crypto. And Binance is effectively chain abstracted. They don't need to know where it's coming from on what chain. They're just like, give me USDT on this address and I'm sorted. And so I feel like we're kind of putting the cart before the horse, where it's like, we haven't reached a point in adoption where the whole, like, of course, I love chain abstraction. I love the idea that you don't need to know where your assets are. You don't need to know what chain you're on. But fundamentally, everyone within DeFi right now does care about, they might not want to do bridging, but they do bridging because there is no other choice. If they only wanted to go down the path of like, I just want to do payments, well, then you don't even have to go into DeFi. They don't care about what chain you're on. Just use Binance and then you're sorted. So I don't think that's necessarily... Yeah, I feel like, Mert has a great tweet where it's like, forget about the next billion users, just think about the next million. And like Iago was saying, it's like once you get to a point where the technology is rock solid and people associate it with their own banking systems, only then can you really think about, okay, now we're going to bring on, 1 billion people on chain. Because before then, we're just running in circles.
Yeah, I still don't agree with saying like we have centralized exchange which provides the best user experience. Why do decentralized things, right? Like I think you can have this mindset if you never had your account blocked for no reason by a centralized entity, or the funds that you transferred got blocked because like the bridges no longer exists or something, right? Like for anyone who experienced that, I think like they value decentralized nature of this much more. Personally, I've never used centralized exchange, not planning on, just because I don't trust the entity that is running on. And I received emails from centralized exchanges like, your account is going to be basically banned from the platform. Please take your assets and leave. Like, I don't need this crap from blockchain. That's one of the reasons why I kind of joined the industry, is because like I don't want that kind of experience. So yeah, the demand for decentralized mechanisms is definitely lower because like people need to understand that and people don't want to understand that. But when it hits them, they suddenly realize the value of this being decentralized. So yeah, we are kind of building for the future user experience that we want to get to in several years when that becomes relevant. But like it takes time to build these systems, and at the same time these systems are still useful if you want to bridge assets, right? And like do it the manual kind of I'm going to bridge my Bitcoin to Zeta chain, and then I'll do something and I'll move it to Ethereum. Like that's totally possible, and it's fun and it's cool. But at the same time, the foundation that we're building is more geared towards the users that are gonna use it in a couple of years' time when it hits more mainstream.
Yeah, I think the canonical example of this is the screenshot of like 7 different ETH addresses across each of the L2s, and it's just miserable to think about, to tell people about. It's embarrassing that that's the way the world is. What, maybe Sushant, for you, like what does that surface area look like for making that better, and how is Wormhole thinking about, what does having ETH on 7 different chains look like in a year from now, and what is Wormhole's role in that?
Could you just repeat the last part of your question?
How do you solve that problem, right? Like
Right.
what does it look like in 12 months for it to be better?
See, that's a great question. I think fundamentally, if you want to solve, I guess the question is like, how do you get away from the having 7 wallets, having all these different addresses, having to memorize all these seed phrases, so that you can have like, a simple, seamless kind of DeFi experience. And from an interop perspective, what we can do as far as like enabling the dApps and the applications and the chains to make this happen is we have to make sure that we're connecting as much of DeFi to each other as possible. And so that looks like having token bridges set up from any asset to any asset, from any chain to any chain, for letting messages to pass seamlessly, quickly, securely, and cheaply across the the entire spectrum of chains. And only then can you start actually building applications that actually make this happen. So I'll give you a good example, like cross-chain lending, for example. It's like if you have an asset on one chain and you want an asset on the other chain, you shouldn't have to have then bridge to that chain and then basically create a new position to actually borrow and lend against that asset. If you have a cross-chain lending market, then you can literally have your assets on any chain and borrow against them on any other chain. And it's the tech, the Wormhole tech, that actually facilitates this to make this happen. And the dApp is able to leverage that to actually make this a seamless experience. And we're already seeing this with protocols like Synonym Finance, with Tapioca DAO, to actually enable this natively, so you don't have to go through the route where, okay, Aave is deployed on 17 different chains, but if I want to borrow like Matic, no, it's not Matic, but on Polygon, for example, then I have to actually create a brand new lending position on that market. And if I want to do something on AVAX, I have to do the same thing. But these like natively, I don't want to call them chain abstracted applications, but natively multi-chain applications, that's the sort of thing that we as an interop protocol can actually enable and are enabling as we speak.
I'd actually like to just say a few words on that. I think one of the interesting things that your fund, Multicoin, have sort of staked their reputation on is the monolithic thesis, which I think there's some really deep wisdom there, which is that a lot of these UX experiences, which are really, really hard and difficult, are the result of the fact that we have so many chains. Imagine a world in which every time you wanted to go to a website, you had to say, all right, like which version of the website am I going to? Am I going to the website that's run on Internet Blue, or am I going to the website that's run on Internet Red, or am I going to, right? So, and anyone who's gone to China knows sort of what that feels like. So right now we have constructed this world of blockchains which sort of have like the great firewall of China around each one of them. And hard workers like the guys at Wormhole are trying to build bridges around it, but it's excruciating work and a whole bunch of UI needs to go into it. I think that speaks to the ultimate power of network effects, particularly in our industry. And I think we ignore them at peril. And I think Ethereum right now is a great demonstration of that.
Yeah, Dennis, you were talking about UX as sort of a proper constraint there. How do you think Zeta sort of fits into that entire spot?
Yeah, so the solution to UX is great applications, but these applications require the infrastructure to be able to resolve assets to their natural native form, right? So a user has ETH on like 5 different chains. They should be able to press a button to convert all of them to just ETH, right, without mentioning which chain. And they should be able to use this ETH to buy something somewhere, right? They might not even know where, and it should happen with just one click of a button. So that's what we call universal apps, meaning that you just write one application that can pool assets and send contract calls between chains. And compared to something like Wormhole, we're doing it in a slightly different way, where instead of point-to-point systems where you have like different countries and like bridges between them, Zeta Chain is a hub and spoke model where it's just a single EVM chain that hosts these universal apps, and each app is by default connected to all the chains. So you deploy your EVM contract and can accept input from Bitcoin and produce an output on Solana, and then maybe call a contract on Ethereum. So it's just a different approach, but at the end of the day, I think both solutions offer the infrastructure required for application builders to not worry about bridging and not worrying about like all these complexities, and just kind of building as if all tokens exist anywhere, and your application can do anything on any chain. It sounds kind of a bit too much, but like that's what you get right now, which is pretty cool.
So we're running a little bit low on time. Maybe as a closing thought, what specifically, either specific to one chain or in terms of how all chains communicate with each other today, what do you think needs to change ASAP? What is fundamentally broken across how blockchains operate today, either in isolation or in terms of how they talk to each other? Is there one thing that you think, one specific problem that you think needs to be solved like quickly now that you're focused on?
I would say let's start with wallets, and kind of make sure that if we're building a wallet, let's just build it multi-chain from the start, because like all the cool tech that we're building, if your wallet is only Bitcoin, then it's hard for us to provide this one-click experience, because you can't sign a Ethereum transaction from Bitcoin. So we're getting this we're hitting this wall. So in the Cosmos ecosystem where I'm from, like that lesson has been learned years ago, and every wallet is multi-chain because there are like 80 interconnected chains. So yeah, I wish all wallets were multi-chain from beginning. And also, like on the chain side, I wish all chains had instant finality. It can take like a few seconds or whatever, it doesn't matter how many seconds, but like no reorgs. That would definitely make the whole omni-chain experience much better.
I think for what needs to change, I know from the idea of say the whole idea is the mission is to scale the EVM, and we believe the EVM is here to stay. And so how do you scale an entire EVM? Well, what that looks like is figuring out what people are looking for and kind of getting that feedback and trying to use that feedback to help grow that ecosystem and kind of keep listening to people. I think also that I think wallets is a good point. That I agree with that. And fundamentally what needs to change, I think it might be a mindset change, because I think with all these different chains, they're all decentralized, so there's no way for them to actually connect unless there's other ways to go about it. There's different steps to do it. So I'm not sure if it's a mindset change or just maybe having less walled gardens. We've dealt with walled gardens our entire lives with, the Apples and the Googles and the Facebooks. So there's always a walled garden. And if crypto wants to change, we're going to have to change that mindset, but I don't think that's going to be a quick fix. That's a long-term idea that needs to take some time to really adjust.
I think to a great extent, we're thinking about our industry all wrong. People keep on talking about bringing on more users or the next billion users. I mean, it's a great idea and it's a lovely idea, but I think it's probably not what we need to be doing. The vast majority of wealth in the world is held by the top 20%. That's 85% of all the world's wealth. The top 5% of the world, which is, Europeans, Americans, and people in East Asia, own 65% of the world's wealth. The true customer of a blockchain is not a person. It's the assets and the value. And what we need to be doing is not onboarding the next billion people. We need to be onboarding the next $1 trillion and the next trillion after that. And for that, we need to be building systems that are built around that idea. I think we're still in the phase where we need to be focusing on infrastructure, but we need to be very clear on the kind of infrastructure that we need to be building. We've kind of run out of degens, and we're starting to see that. Launching more chains are just not taking off. The market is crowded with tokens and chains, and everyone's going to the lowest common denominator of meme coins because we're not building for our real customer, which is wealth. So I would suggest we need to get really, really focused on how we create systems that have no counterparty risk, are there to preserve and grow wealth on a conservative basis, building real financial systems for the future. And I think the only way that we do this is we plug into the security and the massive asset base, and more importantly, perhaps than anything, the trust that has been built in Bitcoin. And I think that is the next phase of our journey as an industry.
In the interest of brevity, I'll just say 2 words: mobile first. I think if you target, especially in developing countries, we're talking LATAM, we're talking Sub-Saharan Africa, these are places where people don't have bank accounts. They don't really have access to any banking infrastructure, but they have a phone and they have access to the internet. That is how you actually onboard all of these people who actually need a decentralized, not even an alternative, because they have nothing, right? This is their only option to actually get into banking of any sort whatsoever, and not enough chains, or if any, are doing anything on the mobile first front.
Amazing. I'm sure we could keep jamming for a while, but I think we're at time. Thank you.
Thank you.